Welcome to Patriot to the Core. I'm Thad Forrester. This podcast exists because of my little brother, Mark Forrester. He was angered by the attacks on 9/11, so he joined the military to help rid the world of terrorists. On September 29, 2010, he was killed on his first deployment. From his death notification to the dignified transfer ceremony, his viewing, funeral, and subsequent memorials, I was amazed at the new world of warriors we met. These patriots have become close to our family and been huge supports. They stood out because of their willingness to voluntarily fight evil. They believed in freedom. Because of their actions, I started this podcast to interview great Americans who serve their country and communities. Thank you for tuning in. Nic, it's good to have you back. I'd like to start with the basics again. And I know you've probably shared this many times, but I still think there's a lot of people that don't understand. And I didn't understand this until kind of recently. Will you explain the difference between human trafficking, between prostitution, between human smuggling? I think those three there, and maybe there's another one that you may know of too.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me back. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and this is going to be a good conversation. Informative, hopefully a little bit fun, and not too much of a downer when we're talking about these types of activities. So when we look at human trafficking, unfortunately, the term has become a little bit politicized, and it's gotten conflated with a bunch of other issues. But there are really three different things when we talk about human trafficking. There's human smuggling, which you mentioned, and that is where somebody is making a choice to come from usually an impoverished area to go to a rich area, and they are asking somebody to get them there through an illegal means. That is human smuggling. Now, those people who say come across our southern border and exist outside of the system they're more vulnerable to being trafficked, but the human smuggling is not human trafficking. And you have prostitution, which is where usually a woman, but it also, I think, involves some men too, who for whatever reason are making a choice to sell commercial sex services, and then they get paid for their labor. Now, those people, again, exist outside of the legal system, and so therefore are vulnerable to trafficking, and so can become trafficking victims. But if they are a willing prostitute, they are not a human trafficking victim. And then you have the other side, which is just human trafficking. So all human trafficking at the end of the day, for the most part, comes down to either organ trafficking or forced labor, or usually it's one of those two. And forced labor in wealthy countries tends to be commercial sex in nature. So your human trafficking in the South China Sea, a lot of it is happening on fishing vessels. That's predominantly men being trafficked. In, say, India and other countries in Southeast Asia, you're going to have a lot of child labor trafficking, making rugs, making bricks, making furniture in Malaysia, something along those lines. And then in the United States, your predominant form of human trafficking is commercial sex in nature, which is where you have somebody who is being defrauded, forced, or coerced, and usually it always eventually terminates into force, and they're being forced to perform a service, in this case commercial sex, against their will and for the economic benefit of somebody else. And so when we talk about human trafficking, it's an important distinction, is who is getting the economic benefit of somebody else's labor.
Okay.
That's the way that I think about human trafficking academically when I'm trying to figure out what is human trafficking and what is not.
That is a great explanation, great differentiation between those three. So thank you. In 2019, you were on episode 68, I believe. Yeah. And you said even then you were growing rapidly. I believe you even lived in a different state at that time. Are you still growing rapidly, or has it leveled off some now as a company, as DeliverFund?
So the company is still growing rapidly, but not in the way that people think, right? Usually when you think of a company growing rapidly, you're thinking in terms of revenue and headcount and things like that. When we think about for-profit companies, in the nonprofit world, we measure growth by impact. So how much impact are we having? And then if you think in terms of economics and math, right, how much money is each, for lack of a better term, unit of impact costing us? And so our unit economics per unit of impact are going down, and our ability to have an impact on the fight is scaling up considerably, especially with this new app that we just launched. So yes, as a company, we are growing considerably. And one of the things that is kind of a point of pride for me is that I have such an amazing team that I'm becoming increasingly irrelevant to this company. Half the time, I don't even know what's going on. I'll see something post on social media like, "Oh, that's so amazing! Who did that? Oh, wait a minute, we did that."
You're a good leader.
It's really fun to watch the company reach this phase. We are by no means out of the wood. We still need people to jump in and help us out. We need people to, donate their resources. We need people to share our stuff on social media. All of those things still remain they're still true. However, our ability to scale impact and be a force multiplier in the fight against human trafficking is really hitting that hockey stick moment.
Good work. I've been following you for several years. I mean, at least since 2019 on social, for sure on LinkedIn. I think that's where I see you the most. I don't know if that's where you're the most active. Would you say it is, Nic? Is LinkedIn or are you just everywhere?
So kind of full disclosure here. I hate social media and I'm not good at it. And so for years, I've had a team that just did that for me and kind of made me look like I knew what I was doing. I've just recently started taking a lot of that over and doing more things myself, just so I could free up some bandwidth for my team. So I am most active on all of them. So if anybody's following me, that is to say that I'm very much still learning how to use these platforms myself.
Yeah, well, so am I. I'll have links to everything too. So the main reason we're here today, I want to give you plenty of time to talk about it and to educate me and everybody listening, because today's September 1st. So as we record this, it's a big day for DeliverFund. Will you go ahead and talk about whatever you want, with the software and what it is and what people can expect and all that, how we can get it, all that kind of thing?
So today, DeliverFund publicly launched an app. It's available on the Apple Store right now. It will be available on the Google Play Store for Android devices here soon. And what it does is that app allows every person in America, we're specifically focused on parents and predominantly single girls, single women. It allows them to run phone numbers and email addresses of the people in their network and the people they're communicating with and the people who are watching and interacting with their children. It allows them to run those phone numbers against our potential human trafficking database. So we have the largest deduplicated, largest, cleanest database of potential human trafficking activity in existence. And traditionally, we have only made that data available to law enforcement. And this is the thing that the generosity of our donors have been allowing us to build for the last really 5 years. So we made that data available to law enforcement, but we'd always get people hitting us up saying, "Hey, how can I participate? What is it that I can do? I'm already donating $50 a month to DeliverFund, to help you guys, but what is it that I can do on a daily basis? What is it that I can do to actually help detect human trafficking?" So about 3 years ago, we started working on a back-end technology that would allow us to distribute or I should say, really would allow us to enhance everybody's ability to fight human trafficking. So not just law enforcement anymore, industry partners, banks, hotels, motels, soccer moms, jujitsu coaches, everybody. And the reason that we did that is I want you to think of a forest. And I want you to imagine there's a really bright spotlight outside the forest. That's law enforcement looking for human traffickers. And when you shine that light inside the forest, you illuminate a lot of places, but the trees in the forest create a lot of shadows. And those shadows are places for human traffickers and child predators to hide. So what we've done with this app is give everybody in the forest a flashlight. So now everybody can start looking for those child predators. And if they find one by just running a phone number or an email address, then they can actually click a report button and they can tag that data for future use by DeliverFund analysts and law enforcement. That's what we just launched. And that's just step one on a longer roadmap of capabilities that we're going to be putting into the hands of the public so that everybody can participate in it's not just fighting human trafficking, it's fighting societal predators. Mm-hmm. So if you have, say, I don't know, your child is playing Roblox and they're chatting with somebody on Roblox, and that person passes them a phone number, says, hey, they try to off-platform them so that they can get them off of those platforms and start manipulating them independently. Say, hey, hit me up on Signal or WhatsApp, or pick your platform at this phone number. And you run that phone number through our app and it comes back as a positive hit with a connection to a commercial sex advertisement. You know that you as a parent have a problem. That's the power of the app that we just released to the public.
Yeah. Did this require a lot of work with lawyers to make sure there was no issues, or was it pretty simple, cut and dry as, hey, once we get a big enough database, we're putting it out there?
It's a combination of both. There's not a lot of legal issues there. So all of the data within our database that we're making available to the public, and we have two different databases. We have one that's law enforcement only because it's active investigations, and then we have this other database that we're making available to the public. But the one that you can access through the app does not have any information that we input into it. The information that's in that app is publicly available on the website right now. It might take you a little bit, but you could actually search that out just using Google as your primary search tool. All we have done is make it extremely easy and simple for you to find the signal that you're looking for. And that's the problem is while you could find, there's a email address in our system, and it's plasticmom@gmail.com. And anybody who downloads and subscribes to the app can, run that email, and you will see what a positive hit looks like. So plasticmom@gmail.com. If somebody in your network has that email, you might think, oh, that's kind of funny. That's a little weird, but you wouldn't really think of that as a threat. And then you plug it into our app and you see that it's correlated with over 123 commercial sex advertisements on the internet across multiple websites. Well, that's a problem. Mm-hmm. Unless, of course, that's the kind of activity that you're looking for.
Yeah.
But I don't think those people are going to be using our app. So that then gives you a really good indicator that you have a problem that requires further investigation. So the email addresses and phone numbers that are in our database, we're not saying that the person who has that email address or that phone number is a human trafficker. All we're saying is that phone number, email address is posted on a commercial sex advertisement on the internet. That is a true statement of fact. So you might be the really unlucky person who got issued a phone number from your cell carrier 2 years ago that was recycled from somebody who was associated with commercial sex advertisement 10 years ago. The chances of that are small, but you might have been that unlucky, in which case you need to go change that phone number, because that might sound a little extreme, but that phone number is associated with commercial sex advertisement online. That is a true statement of fact. And so what we have done by allowing the individual citizen, the mom, the dad, right, the soccer coach, to be able to screen their own networks is leverage the power of the crowd. So now it's not just DeliverFund fighting human trafficking in association with law enforcement or other groups, some of them rogue vigilantes, some of them doing great work, working with local law enforcement. Now we're saying, okay, every single person in the United States of America who has a smartphone can participate in the fight against human trafficking.
Wow.
That is a force multiplier.
Yes.
That is solving problems at scale. That's what I meant when I said that the company is growing exponentially, not in terms of revenue and not in terms of, head count and the things that you would traditionally measure with for-profit company, but in terms of impact.
Yeah.
So the things that we are doing are the most impactful solutions to fighting human trafficking in existence.
What does a parent do? Take, for instance, that happens on Roblox. What would you suggest a parent does if they find a number that pops up in the database?
The first thing that the parent would do is click the report button, which again, that tags that data for future use by DeliverFund analysts and by law enforcement. And then that will bring up a link that says that they can then go to a landing page where we actually will lay out the different things that they can do. We'll have different videos there that show how they should think about the problem. They should obviously cease all communications with that phone number, email address until they can investigate further and determine that it's safe. And then also we've got training that we'll be releasing here in about, I think, a month and a half, where they can actually take some online training to get certified in knowing what human trafficking even is and how to detect that. And so we're trying to move away from this concept of parental control, because parents have been trying to control their children for millennia, and it's never worked. And especially in this world where you have technology that is changing so fast that there's no possible way that parents can keep up because they have full-time jobs. So we're moving away from parental control, and the parental control things that are out there are very, very important, and parents should use them. Platforms like Bark and things like that are absolutely phenomenal, but they're just one piece of the solution. And we're moving towards what some friends of mine, this guy Joshua, termed parental intelligence. And the goal here is to actually reduce the parental workload. Now, every single parent that is listening to this, when I said parental workload, was like, oh, thank you. Because the parental workload is extreme. You've got to cook dinner and change diapers and get kids ready for school and also do your own job and get the car taken care of and do maintenance on your house and do laundry and clean. Oh, and by the way, you're also supposed to be a technology expert while all your child does is focus just on knowing how to run this technology. That's an unreasonable expectation for parents. And so part of the thing that this app does and that the training does, and what we are really trying to service the parents, is to help them understand what it is they need to pay attention to and what they don't.
Well, I've been thinking about this a lot. And by the way, while we've been talking, I downloaded the DeliverFund app. I've done, I know there's 3 options. You can do monthly, quarterly, or annually. And I'm just trying to remember my password now to Apple. So I'll have to do that when we're done. But it's awesome it's there. This is really great technology, Nick. And I've thought about this kind of thing a lot, really concerned as a parent. I have 3 children. My boys they're 10, 8, and 5, and they have iPads. And we've always tried to monitor them. And then it was only recently, like in June, did I learn about the family sharing deal and created their own accounts. And I've been able to control that. But there's still some things that they see that concern me. And I want them to always feel comfortable telling us. And that's what we've tried to create in our home, is to always tell us and don't be ashamed, and let us know if you see something and what to do if you do see something. But the thing is, too, is these games, and they don't have any games yet that I'm aware of that they communicate with people. But I know they've wanted Roblox for a year or two, and we haven't done it. And then I think my mom has tried to get me to give it to them, and I'm just not ready to do that. What are some things, Nick? You've got the app, which tremendously helps, but as a parent, what do you do to help protect your children?
So the first thing that you do is be a good parent. I get asked this question all the time. And with the work that we do at DeliverFund, we have a unique perspective and a unique view into this world. So, and that means that we, work with victims of trafficking. We work with law enforcement officers, obviously, on cases by the hundreds. We work on the technology side. So we have a very unique view because, to my knowledge, you don't have any other entity on the planet that simultaneously gets educated by victims of trafficking, which is really important to get their perspective, and gets educated by law enforcement, very important to get their perspective, and builds technology and is in the technology stack on a daily basis. And what we see through all of that, the common thread, is that trafficking victims are usually coming from a set of circumstances where they're trying to fill, call it the God-sized hole in their heart, the dad-sized hole in their heart, the mom-sized hole in their heart, right? They're trying to solve for something. They're trying to solve a problem. And what we find is that when we have, especially young girls who don't have a positive male role model in their house, it leads to all kinds of problems. And I think the data on that is very clear. So the number one thing I harp on the most is dads be good dads, moms be good moms, in whatever form that means to you as a parent. And there's incredible resources in, websites like parents.com and another website called Focus on the Family and things like that will help you as a parent, because it's probably harder to be a parent in this day and age than at any other, because you have an entire, actually the largest part of the world, which is internet-based communications. I mean, it's what you and I are using right now. It's what you're using to get this word out. You have this massive problem that parents aren't equipped, especially in our generation, because we weren't raised with this. So we don't have, well, this is what my dad did in regards to technology. I mean, in my day, it was, well, you didn't get the grades you were supposed to get, so you can't play Duck Hunt on Nintendo, right? Or you can't play Super Mario Brothers on Nintendo. I mean, that was the extent of it. And it wasn't like I couldn't communicate with anybody else through those gaming consoles. So it's a real problem. And so just being a good parent and the things that you've already said, it's just making sure that your children feel safe and comfortable coming to you. Parents, it's extremely important. And I cannot overemphasize this point. It is extremely important for you to make sure that your children know that if they come to you with something that somebody convinced them to do on the internet, or they come to you with something that somebody else did on the internet, that they are not in trouble for that. But you're a safe place that even if they participated and created a problem, they sent a photo they shouldn't have sent or something, or they sent an address, they sent a phone number, they sent a whatever, that you understand that they're going to make mistakes and you're going to help them solve that problem. You're not going to ground them and get upset with them and do all these disciplinary actions, which are then just going to make them not want to report those things to you. So that's the number one thing. The second thing is to get educated. And that is such a difficult problem, because how do you get educated about this one specific thing? And that's why we're releasing the training that we're releasing at DeliverFund.org. So we'll have these resources for parents, have resources for, young single women. We'll have resources for, paramedics, firefighters, frontline nurses, everybody who's kind of in the system who can come into contact with a vulnerable child, teachers. And then once you get educated, then it's just a matter of staying up on things. So when you look at the problems with technology and the advances in technology, they happen so fast. As an example, you just mentioned that you just found out about the family sharing side of what Apple does. We are releasing updates to parents, and that's why it's important to go to DeliverFund.org and sign up for our newsletter. Follow us on social media. We're releasing updates so that parents will know, hey, this feature was just released by Apple. Here is how you use it to your advantage as a parent to reduce your parental workload and keeping your children safe.
Excellent. One thing that I turned me to you several years ago. I don't remember how we met, but I do know finding out that you were an Air Force PJ.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm very familiar with him, because of my brother. And the way I view this, and I know you've talked about this before, Nick, but I would kind of like to get your perspective here is these guys like my brother, like you, I mean, you excelled in an elite field. You don't like bullies. And is that something, is that how you always have been? But regardless, that's kind of what you're doing now. Is that not right?
That's exactly what we're doing now. And you're right. I worked in the special operations community my entire really professional life before I started doing this type of work and really kind of getting into tech business. But when I was in the government, it was all special ops. And even at the CIA, like the CIA doesn't have special ops, it has special activities, so to speak, and it has intelligence operations, but it does have groups of specialized people who do work that is, we'll just say, eerily similar to what we did in special ops and in facilitating intelligence operations. And so my entire life has been in those types of communities. And what I learned most is that a lot of those folks in those communities, a lot of childhood trauma, a lot of things that they really should be dealing with, but instead they were special operators. And Andy Stumpf and I have talked about this at length on his podcasts about, how we deal with those problems. But there's a lot of trauma. And what I can say is that with very few exceptions, there's not a single man I served with who was a bully and who was a bully growing up. But every single one of them, as soon as they saw a bully, it like flips a switch in their brain, and they take the attitude of, well, I'll be your Huckleberry, come bully me. So I don't think it's so much of the bully piece as it is people who are vulnerable being exploited by people who are stronger than them. And if you look at pretty much every single special operations creed has something to do with protecting the people who cannot protect themselves, right? And so it could be, pararescue, these things we do that others may live. It could be the Green Berets, an incredible program, they de-oppresso liber, so liberate the oppressed. I think the SEALs have something similar. It's all about being the stronger person, of which if you're in Air Force Special Ops or really any special operations career field, you have proven as a matter of fact that you are one of the stronger people. And it's being one of the stronger people and using that strength to protect people that don't have the same strength advantage. And usually that means that you're protecting them against somebody who does have a strength advantage and is using it to exploit that person. And what I realized in my role at the CIA was the power of technology to really be a force multiplier. And that started in the Air Force. Because if you think about it, Air Force Pararescueman and combat control, at least in my day, those were the only special operations career field. Now I think there's lots of them, but I've been out of it longer than I was in it. So I'll just speak to what I know at the time. We were one person, two people, right? Two combat controllers getting embedded with an ODA, one combat controller getting embedded with a SEAL team, two PJs and a combat controller getting embedded with, pick a special ops unit. We were there to be a force multiplier because, look at your brother's a great example. What is a greater force multiplier than a combat controller with a stack of aircraft sitting just off the horizon who can come in and, solve problems by killing people by the hundreds? There's no greater force multiplier on the battlefield than a combat controller. When it comes to personnel recovery, there is no greater force multiplier than an Air Force Pararescueman, especially if that Air Force Pararescueman has a combat controller sitting next to them. Right now, the two of them can actually accomplish more than entire armies. And so that's really that force multiplication mindset is where I came from, because that's what the Air Force does. But then take that one step further into the CIA, where I really got to see the power of technology. I got to be part of a experimental unit. Or, I'm sorry, I got to be my unit ran an experiment in coordination with another directorate, and it was essentially trying to see how fast a self-contained team could move. So we ripped our own phones, we did our own technology. I literally became a Palantir certified analyst. We did all of these things, and it's why actually I have this t-shirt on that says, from shooters to computers, because what I started to realize was that the keyboard was the ultimate scalable weapon in the fight against terrorism. Well, it's the same thing in the fight against human trafficking. And so, yes, we're fighting bullies, but not by punching him in the nose anymore with a JDAM now, or a javelin missile or a rifle, whatever it is. Now it's by enhancing law enforcement's ability to fight them, because really it's only law enforcement that can do that. When you see former special operators going, rogue, doing human trafficking operations, that's a problem, because not only is that not scalable, but there's lots of problems in court with the actual prosecution of those human traffickers and the prosecution of those cases, where if all you're doing is providing the intelligence and you're doing the heavy lifting and, quite frankly, kind of the boring part that nobody really wants to do, you can really enhance the fight and you can do it at scale. Well, now, no matter what, you give me $1 billion tomorrow, and next year I'm just going to need $1 billion. So those models are not real scalable, but if we put technology into the hands of people, we can really accomplish a lot. No different than that combat controller or PJ with a bunch of technology, a bunch of radios, a bunch of ATAC platforms that they're using to control aircraft, and they're using to move things around the battlefield to go help people. It's no different. One person uses technology and they are a complete force multiplier and on the battlefield. It's no different than every citizen in America using technology to be a force multiplier on the battlefield of America and make it so that it's nearly impossible for societal predators to hide.
That's interesting. That's a really unique perspective. One thing I think about with combat controllers and PJs is how you don't deploy, you don't stay with your own teams. You're always attaching, and you mentioned this a little earlier. And so you're having to integrate with different people, and different personalities and prove yourself. Is there any kind of application there, Nic, too, on that side of it for what you're doing now?
Oh yeah. So the thing about Air Force Pararescue and combat control and Air Force special operations in general, again, I think there's more career fields now, is it doesn't matter how strong you are, how fast you are, how good of a shooter you are, how good at your job you are. When you show up to work for an ODA or work with an ODA for the first time, you're the Air Force guy. You show up to a SEAL team, you're the Chair Force guy. You show up to a Marine Special Operations unit, you're the Air Force guy. And so everybody's very much kind of weary of the Air Force guy, because let's face it, the Air Force does not exactly have a reputation for physical prowess. And that's okay, right? I mean, I'm not the guy that they asked to make those decisions. But as within the Air Force Special Operations community, when you show up to those units and you're the Air Force guy, it means you have to work harder. Have to. It's not an option. You have to work harder than everybody else in order to prove yourself. So you're kind of the perpetual new guy. And then right about the time the team really likes you and they're trusting you and you're just really melding with that team, and everybody rotates out. And then because Air Force Special Ops is an extremely limited asset, they're going into a training and rest cycle, and you're going straight to another deployment cycle. And you show up, you were just with an ODA, and now you're with a SEAL team, and guess what? You're the Air Force guy. So you're starting over all over again. And that mentality of kind of never really getting to just rest on the thing that you've done in the past, and always being the new guy, really forces you to stay on top of your game. And it forces you to pivot and continually get better. So in building DeliverFund, we've done the same thing. I mean, if you look at what DeliverFund was in 2013, 2012, really, when I first conceptualized, going after the human trafficking problem, to 2013, early 2013 in January, when my co-founder Sean Fenema and I decided that we were actually going to do this, to what we do today, the amount of pivots and shifts have been pretty considerable. And it's not because we didn't know what we were doing back then. I mean, when we first started this, we had Homeland Security officers asking us to do surveillance on massage parlors, and we were doing it all. But they were only asking us to do that because we were the easy button. They didn't really need us to do that. What they really needed were target packages on human traffickers. They really needed us to go find that victim that ran away from the restoration home in Nebraska and was part of one of their cases in Iowa. I mean, that was the work that they really needed done. And so as we started doing that, then it was like, okay, well, we now have to prove ourselves. So again, continual new guy mentality. We had to prove ourselves to law enforcement. And in the process of doing that, we learned what they really needed and started working with outside vendors and essentially just buying technology. And then realized that a lot of the people running those companies had never actually done the work that we had done, which is, think of that as our secret sauce and kind of our unfair advantage. And so we would go to them and say, hey, we need you to change your software to do this. And they wouldn't understand it, so they wouldn't do it. So then we started about 5 years ago building out our own data sets and building out our own technology. And now we've got full-time engineers that's what they do. So that that mentality and mindset of continual improvement that I really learned in the Air Force and carried into the Central Intelligence Agency is now what informs the way that we go forward at DeliverFund.
Yeah. Do you have many former Spec Ops guys that work for DeliverFund or consult with you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So contrary to popular belief, Jason Bourne is not real. Most special operators could not do any level of data analysis. Now, obviously, I'm speaking very broadly here. There are special operators with relevant levels of education who, and they're kind of the guys who were always known as the nerds. I'm one of those on their team who can, but most special operations folks don't understand analysis. It's actually the special operations support personnel. It's the human intelligence collectors and all source intelligence analysts and the targeters. Those are the ones who we tend to actually primarily bring in. And I knew that from the beginning that we would need kind of that operational mindset. But for the most part, if you look at the operational piece of what special operators do in the field, for the most part, and again, there's exceptions to this rule, but for the most part, they are the ones who are executing on the intelligence work that somebody else did. And that intelligence work is usually not done by an operator, right? Or an operative. It's done by an analyst. And so the cycle tends to be, right, somebody collects the information, it goes to analysts compile that, figure out what action needs to be done. The action then goes to the action arm, and they then execute that action. Well, the action arm in this case is law enforcement. And so we have former special operations intelligence personnel who work with us. We have former law enforcement detectives who work for us. And then the predominance of our focus is on the engineering and data side, because you can have the best analysis platform in the world. It doesn't matter if you can't get the right set of data into it, and you can't get that data in the volume needed. And that's the problem that we had with previous platforms that we worked with, was they would pull in 6,000 to 8,000 data points in over a 24-hour period. We're pulling in about 4,000 to 6,000 data points a minute. So about 240,000 times more data. So instead of combing through millions of points of interest, looking for bright spots on the map, which leads to kind of a less detailed map as a way to think about it, we have over 3 billion points of interest. So we can see with much finer granularity where the problem really is. and then how to go after that. And then the AI that currently is a backbone within the system that does essentially some fuzzy matching to help, to help you essentially answer the questions that you should have asked. That is just going to get better and better and better till eventually it becomes a full-on human trafficking signal detector.
Will you explain the difference then in what DeliverFund does versus some of these other organizations? I know you've got shooters to computers. That's an awesome shirt. I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to ask you about the shirt. But really, what is the difference? Because some of these organizations, they actually go out and run the operations. Some of them train law enforcement to do it. And I mean, what is DeliverFund? What do you do specifically?
I think the best way to say it is we are a force multiplier and enhancement for anybody who wants to fight human trafficking. So I know as much about kicking doors as anybody on the planet, right? I got 30 combat deployments under my belt. I did, more than some, less than a lot of people, a lot of special operators out there.
30,
I mean, even conventional military did way more than I did. But I've got that under my belt. For about 17 years of my life, I was gone about 8 to 10 months a year, every single year. And that goes all the way back to the 90s, right? So pre-September 11th, when PJs and combat controllers were actually the most deployed special operations career fields. I mean, we were kind of in all of the Middle East stuff back then. And so that's basically a long way of saying that the reason that we don't go, kick doors and run operations and things like that is because it's not scalable. Every single time you have to put a person on an airplane to go do something, and usually sometimes it's former special ops guys, and sometimes it's just rich guys who, quite frankly, never really did anything of courage in their life and decided that, you know what, I'm going to go do? I'm going to go play cop for a day. That's not a good use of resources. And I'll die on that hill. If you want to go run operations, join law enforcement. They really, really need the help. Go to the law enforcement academy, get a badge, get a gun, and go do that work. Another reason that we don't do that work is I'm not an expert in law enforcement rules of engagement on a target, right? So I could potentially hurt a law enforcement officer's case if I'm actually there with them. And they don't need me to be there with them. They're the experts at actually executing on the arrest, on executing on the evidence collection and things that need to be done, not some former special ops guys. And so where we focus is on the thing that nobody is focused on, which is bringing the data to law enforcement to do that work. And we don't do that exclusively through DeliverFund. Plenty of organizations that we work with, other nonprofits, where they essentially, when we came out with DeliverFund, we were one of 2 organizations that were fighting human trafficking, and we were the only one that had people with special operations and CIA operations background. Now there's, I think there's a new one that pops up every couple of days. I think there's a lot of guys who get out and are like, look at what I did, and go, oh, I'm going to go do what Nick did. And I'm like, if you only understood how hard this was. And so they create their own organizations. That's awesome. There's no possible way we can be experts in their backyard the way that they're experts in their backyard, and we can maintain the relationships that they maintain. It still doesn't solve the data problem. And so if you have a nonprofit that is doing targeting for law enforcement, awesome. We have a targeting and data analysis platform that connects, that's already connected. We're already working with over 600 law enforcement agencies across the United States. We've already got the data that you need in order to go do that work. Give us a call. We'll bring you in as an affiliate, and we'll help you understand how you can be the most effective in your community. And I think that's really the lesson. And that's actually the difference between what I learned in the military and what I learned at the CIA, right? In the military, it was like, we were the force multiplier. At the CIA, it was a little more nuanced. You're trying to get the tribal chief to be the force multiplier. You're trying to get the individuals in the local community to be the force multiplier to essentially secure their community so that you can then go get that done in the next one and the next one and the next one. So for us, at DeliverFund, we've really always taken this team of teams approach where anybody who wants to do what we do to help their own community and work with law enforcement, we will assist them and we will help them do that. I can't simultaneously be running embedded operations in Tennessee and California and Montana and Florida and Texas. I don't have the bodies and manpower to do that. But if somebody's in Tennessee and they have the relevant background and they're taking the right approach and they're doing things properly from a paperwork perspective, we absolutely will jump behind them and help them be able to be effective in their own community. And I think that's really just to kind of bring it back to the force multiplier approach and the operational enhancement approach, is just because I have all these combat deployments and I know how to do that work, if I have to get on an airplane, it takes me a day to get there, and then I'm going to go, do whatever work, one very specific operation, and then be done with that operation. Let's say it takes 2 or 3 days, and then fly back home. There's another day. There's an entire week, accomplished one operation. Or I can simultaneously enhance the ability of over 600 law enforcement departments to do operations, again, simultaneously. So if, let's just say, just 10% of those law enforcement departments that we're already working with are doing operations, well, there's 60 operations going on, and nobody had to get on an airplane to go do anything. Mm-hmm. That's how you fight the problem at scale. We are not going to shoplift our way out of this problem, right? We're not going to arrest our way out of this problem. We have to enhance everybody's ability to fight this problem, from industry, so social media, hotels, motels, payments, banking, insurance, the gig economy around, Ubers and Lyfts and taxis, all of that. We enhance all of their ability to fight human trafficking through implementation of proper data and technology. Every single parent's ability to fight human trafficking and protect their child through the proper implementation of data and technology. And then properly implement data and technology to law enforcement to help them fight human trafficking. And we do that all simultaneously without anybody ever getting on an airplane and going anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Nic, I 100% support and believe in what you're doing. You've got a captive audience right now. What do you want to say, to kind of wrap it all up?
The first thing is, please go to the App Store. I'm sure there will be a link in the show notes, and download our app. Subscribe.
Yeah, you've already got about 40 something ratings, by the way, as of.
Oh, we do?
Minutes. Yeah. Yeah. So you've had a lot of downloads today, by the way.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, we've already been getting text messages from people that we know who have our contact information saying, "Hey, I just ran the massage parlor across from my kid's school, and it came up positive." I mean, you got a building across the street from your child's school that's offering commercial sex services. You might want to notify law enforcement that they need to do something about that and create a public outcry.
Yeah.
So go download the app. Yes, we are a nonprofit. We charge $1.99 a month for access to the app. The reason that we are able to make that available so cheap, so that anybody who can afford a smartphone can afford, I think if you buy a year up front, it's like $18. Mm-hmm. The reason why we're able to do that is because of the generosity of our donors. And so if you have financial bandwidth, and that does not have to mean $5,000 a month. If you can do $5,000 a month, we have donors who do, and that's great. But really, it's the $50 a month down to $5 a month donors who really help us keep the lights on. So if you find value in what you've just listened to, please contribute financially. Help us take these technologies to the next level. Help us advance down that roadmap so that you're now not just able to screen phone numbers and email addresses. You're able to do even more to protect your own children, right? There's something in it for you. Sharing our stuff on social media is obviously extremely important. And then kind of back to what you said in the beginning about what parents can do, be a good parent. That is the number one thing you can do to protect your child from all forms of exploitation, not just human trafficking, is be a good parent.
Great advice. Do you want to close with the till Valhalla comment?
Oh, you obviously have been following my social media. Yeah. You know, I the special operations community is a community that I care deeply about. I've got a lot of dead friends who gave their lives, not just for this country, but also for that community. And I also am alive today because of some of the actions of those folks and because of that community. And during the war, the concept of Valhalla started, kind of coming up, and it was an old Viking, old Norse religion, very, very pagan and demonic, actually. And I'm a strong Christian, and I've got reasons that I believe that. And if anybody wants to argue that on a math and science basis, like, hit me up and let's do it publicly. There's a reason I believe in that stuff. But what I try to focus on is not only the mental and physical health of these operators when they get out, but also the spiritual health. It's an important piece. And so this whole concept of, like, you're going to go to a place where you're just going to dine with your brothers, like, that's not what I want my life to mean. Where if you look at whether or not you believe in Christianity, if you look at the concept of heaven, which is like, you are going to go to a place for eternity where you will not have pain. You will not be just dining with your brothers, while that is a part of it. And so, yeah, I made that Instagram post to just say, hey, special operations guys, like, cut this freaking Valhalla crap, right? One, understand what you're even talking about. Most guys will just, raise a glass and say it. And, like, God forbid they actually read an actual history book about the issues, because that's not what they want to be pinning their identity to. Pin your identity to one of service. Pin your identity to one of a eternal meaning. And if that's, if that's not the God of the Bible, and that's not heaven, like, okay. But the concept of heaven, which is, we want our lives to have eternal meaning. And as warriors, we want our lives to have eternal meaning. Like, that's what we should be focused on. And that's why, in starting DeliverFund, I've had people kind of come and go through the doors of DeliverFund, and some of them because they moved on to bigger and better things. And some people because, as special operators, they just couldn't wrap their mind around the fact that they were not a shooter anymore. It's like, you gave that up. The new weapon is the keyboard, and they just were not willing to put in the work required, in the education required to be effective with that weapon. So then you lose an identity. And so it was just a way of, that social media post was just a way for me to, kind of poke people and say, hey, like, what are you actually saying? One, do you even realize what it is you're saying when you say Valhalla, right? Till Valhalla. And two, aim for something better. Like, stop aiming so low. Aim for something better and be better. And now that you're out, go do big things with your life, and aim for aim for a eternal consequence, right? You aim for an eternal way of being relevant to every generation after you. And that's what I'm hoping to do with DeliverFund.
You are. I think you are. That's great, Nick, man. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. You are an absolute patriot to the core, and appreciate you being back on Patriot to the Core. Anything else?
No, thank you for having me, and thank you for helping us get the word out. Greatly appreciate it.
Man, my pleasure. That wraps up another edition of Patriot to the Core. I hope you enjoyed this one with Nic McKinley as much as I did. I ask that you subscribe to my podcast on your favorite podcast player. And if you like what you heard, leave a review on Spotify and or Apple Podcast. They make it very easy to give 5 stars and also to write a review. Also, consider supporting what Nick and his nonprofit do at DeliverFund. And one last thing, if you normally listen to my podcast on Stitcher, you probably already know this, but Stitcher no longer offers podcast as of August 29th. The good news is you found another player, obviously, to listen, so there are many options. Thank you for listening and for all the support. Now enjoy this outro music from the A-Team. Unless you're watching on YouTube, then you won't hear it because I'll get in trouble for copyright issues again.